Hello and welcome to US Visa Updates. I'm here with you today because I need to share something that's keeping many immigrants up at night, something that's happening right now across the country, and something that could potentially affect you or someone you love. What I'm about to discuss isn't just another immigration story. This is about real people, real families, and real consequences that can turn your American dream into an absolute nightmare in just one denied application. Before we dive deep into this critical topic, I want you to understand something. If you're watching this video right now, whether you're already a green card holder thinking about citizenship or you're in the middle of your immigration journey, what you're about to learn could be the difference between staying in America with your family and facing removal proceedings. I'm not trying to scare you, but I am trying to prepare you because knowledge is power. And in today's immigration climate, being prepared isn't optional anymore. It's absolutely essential. Now let me tell you about Maria. That's not her real name, but her story is very real and it's happening to more people than you might imagine. Maria is from the Philippines. She came to this country years ago, fell in love, got married to a US citizen, and like thousands of others, she applied for her green card through marriage. Everything seemed perfect. Her 2-year conditional green card was approved. The government looked at her marriage, examined the evidence, conducted interviews, and determined that yes, this was a genuine, real marriage based on love. She and her husband were building a life together, and everything was moving forward exactly as it should. 2 years later, as required by law, Maria and her husband filed their joint petition to remove the conditions on her green card. They submitted even more evidence of their life together. More photos, more joint bank statements, more proof that their marriage was real and continuing. And guess what? The government approved it again. They looked at everything. They were satisfied, and they issued Maria her full 10-year green card. At this point, Maria had been vetted and approved by the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services not once, but twice. She had every reason to believe that her immigration journey was on solid ground. Fast forward several more years. Maria has been living in the United States as a lawful, permanent resident. She's followed every rule, paid her taxes, stayed out of trouble, and built a life here. She's integrated into American society, maybe learned better English, made friends, established roots in her community, and naturally, like so many immigrants who love this country, she decided it was time to take the next step. She wanted to become a United States citizen. She wanted to vote, to serve on juries, to have that American passport, to fully participate in the country she now called home. So she filled out her N-400 application for naturalization, paid her fees, submitted her paperwork, and waited for her interview. But what happened next was something Maria never saw coming, something that would shake her entire world and make her question everything she thought she knew about her status in this country. When she went to her citizenship interview, instead of being asked the standard civics questions and English test, instead of the interview she prepared for, she was confronted with accusations, serious accusations. The USCIS officer told her that they had reviewed her entire immigration file going back to the very beginning, and they had determined that her original marriage, the one that got her green card years ago, was fraudulent. They claimed it was what we call in immigration law a fake marriage or a sham marriage. They were saying that her marriage to her U.S. citizen husband was never real, never genuine, never legitimate. Now, stop and think about what this means. This wasn't just a denial of her citizenship application. This was USCIS essentially saying that her green card, the one they had approved twice before, should never have been granted in the first place. They were calling into question her entire legal status in the United States. And here's what makes this even more devastating. The officer told Maria that they had obtained a signed statement from her husband, her own husband, saying that the marriage had never been consummated. In other words, according to this statement, there was no wedding night, no intimate marital relationship, which in the eyes of immigration law could indicate that the marriage was never real to begin with. Can you imagine being in Maria's position? You've been in this country legally for years. You've done everything right. You've been approved multiple times by the same government agency. And now suddenly they're telling you that everything was wrong from the start, that you obtained your green card fraudulently, and that not only are you being denied citizenship, but you could potentially face deportation proceedings. Your entire life in America, everything you've built, your home, your job, your community, your future, all of it hanging in the balance because of accusations about events that happened years ago. Now, Maria insists, and she insists strongly, that her marriage was and is real. She says she genuinely loved her husband, that their relationship was authentic, and that she has no idea why he would have signed such a statement or what the circumstances were around that alleged confession. And this is where things get really complicated and really important for everyone watching this video, because what Maria's case teaches us is that in the current immigration environment, especially with the heightened enforcement and scrutiny we're seeing, nothing from your immigration past is ever truly settled. Nothing is ever completely safe from re-examination. You might be sitting there thinking, well, if my green card was approved, I'm fine. If I got through the conditions removal, I'm safe. But Maria thought the same thing. She had 2 approvals. She had been living here legally for years, and yet when she applied for the next benefit, citizenship, everything from her past was pulled out, examined under a microscope, and used against her. This is the new reality of immigration enforcement, and it's something every single person in the immigration system needs to understand and prepare for. Let me explain what's happening and why this is becoming more common. When you apply for U.S. citizenship, USCIS doesn't just look at whether you meet the current requirements for naturalization. They don't just check if you've been a permanent resident for 5 years or 3 years, if married to a U.S. citizen. They don't just verify that you have good moral character and that you can speak English and know civics. No, they pull your entire immigration file, what we call your A file, and they review everything. Every application you ever filed, every petition ever submitted on your behalf, every interview you ever attended, every answer you ever gave, every document you ever submitted, all of it gets reviewed again. And here's what's particularly challenging in today's environment. Immigration officers are being trained to look for inconsistencies, discrepancies, anything that might suggest fraud or misrepresentation. They're comparing answers you gave years ago in your green card interview with answers you're giving now in your citizenship interview. They're looking at statements your spouse made back then and comparing them to any current statements. They're examining whether you lived at the addresses you claimed, whether your marriage showed the typical signs of a genuine relationship, whether there's any evidence that might suggest your marriage was entered into solely for immigration benefits. Now, in Maria's case, the specific accusation was about non-consummation of the marriage. In immigration law, if a marriage is never consummated, meaning the couple never has intimate relations, that can be evidence, though not conclusive proof, that the marriage wasn't genuine. It's one factor among many that officers consider when evaluating whether a marriage is real. But here's the thing, and this is crucial. Non-consummation alone doesn't automatically make a marriage fraudulent. There can be legitimate reasons, medical issues, religious beliefs, personal circumstances. What matters is the totality of the circumstances. Was the couple living together? Did they combine finances? Did they present themselves as a married couple to friends and family? Did they share a life together? But in Maria's situation, USCIS apparently obtained some kind of statement from her husband that they interpreted as evidence of fraud. And once that seed of doubt is planted, once those accusations are made, the burden shifts. Suddenly, Maria has to prove all over again, years later, that her marriage was genuine. She has to defend against accusations about events that happened long ago. She has to somehow rebut a statement allegedly made by her own spouse. This is an incredibly difficult position to be in, and it illustrates several critical lessons that every immigrant needs to learn and remember. The first crucial lesson, and I cannot stress this enough, is that your immigration file never goes away. Every application, every petition, every interview, every document becomes part of your permanent USCIS record. Years from now, when you apply for citizenship or any other benefit, all of that information will be reviewed again. This means that it's absolutely critical to be thorough, accurate, and truthful in every single immigration application you ever file. Any inconsistencies, any discrepancies, any information that doesn't match up can come back to haunt you years down the road, even if your application was initially approved. The second lesson is that initial approvals don't guarantee future benefits. Just because USCIS approved your green card doesn't mean they've forever closed the book on examining how you got that green card. Just because you successfully removed the conditions doesn't mean they won't question that same marriage when you apply for citizenship. Each new application is a fresh opportunity for the government to review your entire immigration history. And in today's enforcement environment, with the emphasis on rooting out fraud and denying benefits to those who obtain them improperly, you can expect that review to be thorough and skeptical. The third lesson, and this might be the most important one, is that small details matter enormously. In immigration cases, what might seem like minor inconsistencies to you can appear as major red flags to an immigration officer who's trained to spot fraud. Maybe in one interview, you said you and your spouse met at a party, but in another interview, months or years later, you said it was at a restaurant. Maybe you said your wedding had 50 guests, but your spouse said 75. Maybe you described your living arrangements slightly differently than your spouse did. These kinds of small discrepancies, even if they're honest mistakes or misunderstandings or just normal human memory errors, can be interpreted as evidence that you're making up a story, that you're not telling the truth, that your marriage or your basis for immigration wasn't real. I've seen cases, many cases in my years of practicing immigration law where marriages were absolutely genuine, where couples truly loved each other, but their applications were denied or questioned because their answers to USCIS questions didn't match perfectly. Maybe the husband said they went to the grocery store together every Sunday, but the wife said usually on Saturdays. Maybe one spouse remembered they had 2 joint bank accounts, but the other remembered 3 because they forgot about a small savings account. These are normal variations in human memory and perception, but to an immigration officer looking for fraud, they can seem like gotcha moments, like evidence of deception. The fourth lesson is about the current political and enforcement climate. We have to be realistic about where we are right now in terms of immigration enforcement. There is enormous pressure on USCIS officers to deny cases where there's any hint of fraud. There is increased scrutiny on marriage-based green cards in particular because those have historically been an area where fraud occurs, and there is a general atmosphere of suspicion toward immigration applicants that didn't exist to the same degree in previous years. What this means practically is that your case is being evaluated in an environment where the benefit of the doubt is not being given to applicants, where officers are incentivized to find problems rather than overlook them, where any question or inconsistency will be pursued rather than dismissed. And this brings me to the fifth lesson, which is that the consequences of denial have changed dramatically. It used to be that if your citizenship application was denied, well, that was disappointing, but you kept your green card and maybe tried again later. But that's not necessarily the case anymore. If USCIS denies your citizenship application because they've determined that you obtained your green card fraudulently, they're not just denying you citizenship, they're potentially initiating removal proceedings against you. They're putting you in deportation. Because if your green card was obtained through fraud, then legally you're not actually a lawful permanent resident. You never were. And that means you're removable from the United States. Think about what this means. You go in for what you think is a citizenship interview, a positive step forward in your American journey, and you come out facing deportation. Now, let's talk about what Maria needs to do now and what anyone in a similar situation should do. First and foremost, she cannot give up. An initial denial, even a denial based on serious accusations like fraud, is not the end of the road. There are appeal processes, there are ways to fight back, there are legal arguments and defenses that can be raised. But, and this is critical, she absolutely needs experienced legal representation. This is not something she can handle on her own. This is not a situation for do-it-yourself immigration. The stakes are too high, the issues too complex, the potential consequences too severe. What her attorney will need to do is gather evidence to prove that her marriage was genuine. This means going back years and reconstructing the history of her relationship and marriage. It means gathering documents that show she and her husband lived together, joint leases or mortgages, utility bills in both names, joint bank account statements, joint credit cards, insurance policies listing each other as beneficiaries, photos of the two of them together over the years at family events, on vacations, celebrating holidays, affidavits from friends and family who can attest to the genuine nature of their relationship. Any evidence that shows they presented themselves as a married couple and shared a life together. It also means addressing head-on this alleged statement from her husband about non-consummation. What exactly did he say? Under what circumstances? Was he properly informed of his rights? Was he under duress? Did he understand what he was signing? Was there a language barrier? Was he misled about what the document said? These are all questions that need to be investigated. And if her husband is willing to take back his statement or clarify or provide a new statement, that could be crucial evidence. Thank you for watching U.S. Visa Updates. Please like, share, and subscribe to stay informed about immigration news and real-life stories that can help protect you and your family's future in America.